Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you. Pleased to be joined now by the radio color analyst, the Bills Radio Network, also the host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. It's my broadcast partner, Eric Wood. And Eric, thanks for giving us some time here on a Monday. And I guess maybe just put your bow on the Bills preseason and maybe give us an idea on where you think some of the tougher decisions position-wise lie on this Bills roster for this coaching staff and personnel department to get down to the number they need to by tomorrow.
Yeah, I think when you look at the way this preseason has shaken out and really the injuries, and we saw injuries at receiver, we saw it at safety, we saw it at linebacker. And so those seem to me to be where a lot of these big decisions are going to lie, especially if the Bills are going to keep just 5 receivers again. Who's going to be that 5th receiver? Will it be Valdez-Scantling? Will it be Shavers? And there's just Isabella. It's going to be interesting to see how all of that shakes out. The safety position's been a nightmare with all of the injuries, and then you lose the consistency that you've had there over the years with Jordan Porter and Micah Hyde both not being on the team. You address that position through the draft. You have Taylor Rapp, who played a good amount last year, and then just the injuries stacked up. And then the linebacker position seems to be interesting. Deion Jones was a guy that I thought he could potentially be the starting will linebacker a couple weeks ago heading into the season. If Dorian Williams wasn't able to be, if they didn't have a lot of confidence in him in coverage, well, then he was one of the first players released at cutdown time. And so it's going to be interesting to see really who that 5th receiver is, and then kind of the back end of that linebacking core to see who makes this roster.
Yeah, and it's always a puzzle, as to who will fill what roles, because there's always a bunch of must-haves you got to have on the roster. Kick return, punt return guys. You got to have special teams guys, and where those guys come from also says something about how many guys at that spot you keep. So if they go 5 wide receivers, that would mean that probably like a DB like Daequan Hardy can make the team because he can do the punt returning, kick returning, where you don't need an extra wide receiver, a guy who handles the ball to do it, or maybe it's going to be a running back, somebody like that. So piecing those skill sets together really becomes something we can't tell. That's what the great unknown for all of us. If you're going to pick the 5 best wideouts, might not be as difficult until you sprinkle in the ancillary roles that the 3, 4, and 5 wideout have to fill.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Daequan Hardy is a guy that I'm extremely excited about. I thought he got better each week with his decision-making on the punt returns. Seems to be a sure-handed catcher, seems to be explosive with the football when he does get the opportunity to make a play. He's a willing runner, and he's exciting to me. And then the ability to be able to even play on the outside. He had great matchups against George Pickens, 6'4", 6'5" receiver for the Steelers, goes toe-to-toe with him out there on the edge, had a great game against the Steelers, and then backed it up again with another solid performance against the Panthers. That's a guy who I don't think you even have the option to try and put him on your practice squad because he'll get swiped by another team if you try to do that. So he's a guy that I think through the preseason games really solidified a spot on the roster this year, and then that does give them some flexibility as well with him being likely the primary returner this year for the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, I probably make him my most improved player in the preseason. From where he came in week 1 to week 3, he made leaps and bounds. And I even asked Coach McDermott after the game about his decision-making specifically, and he said it was very impressive. Those are Coach McDermott's words, because it wasn't only the one at the 4-yard line that he let bounce into the end zone, something he did not do in week 1 of the preseason, but then later in the game, there's a kickoff near the sideline, and he left it alone to see if it would go over the sideline, and it did. And it gave him a drive start at the 40. He comes to the sideline, and Coach McDermott's smacking him on the rear saying, great decision. So I think he kind of solidified himself as the return man for this team, guys. I don't know if you feel differently, but what he did in the last 2 weeks between the 31-yard return at Pittsburgh and then the decision-making that he made in this last game, I think he locked it down.
Yeah, giving him that role to begin with says you believe he can do it. Then when he does it as well as he did, listen, if they put him on the waiver wire, Chicago or Pittsburgh or Carolina will pick him up after having him do it to that, right? So they saw it firsthand. So, yeah, there are other guys like that, and certainly the story of training camp has been guys like Joe Andreessen, and we had callers already saying, hey, you got to get those guys off the field because they're too valuable. And the simple fact of the matter is somebody has to play the fourth quarter of the preseason. It's the last half of the summer. What were some of your impressions, the way the Bills finished out that game? Who jumped out to you? You know that it does say something, and those guys are out there late in the last preseason game. As good as they've played, they still had some things to prove.
Yeah, on the offensive side of the football, the two young running backs really impressed me. Evans had the nice touchdown catch in that game, appeared to have a hamstring, so we'll see how that shakes out. But Frank Gore Jr., he was exciting to watch. He packs some punch in that little frame, but it's his vision and the way he makes cuts and the quickness that he has. I mean, he's a guy that, the Bills, I'm sure, are looking at saying, hey, can we get this guy? Are we even going to be able to get him back on our practice squad? And a guy that they'd likely be excited to elevate at some point this year if need be. He really impressed me. Some of the young offensive linemen, Van Pran Granger, thought he had a nice game in the pivot, getting the start at center. And so he'll have to work on cross-training at guard to be one of those guys in uniform on Sundays, but he's the guy that I feel like made this roster through the way that he played throughout preseason and in training camp. Some of the receivers looked good catching the ball. Kane used his size well, maybe a little too late from, some of those younger receivers trying to make a push, or some of the guys that got signed during training camp to make a push for the 53, but it'll be interesting to see who they try and keep on the practice squad. The tight end position's interesting with Quentin Morris having the shoulder injury. Zach Davidson has a different skill set than Quentin Morris. If you're thinking, hey, I want more of a blocker and Morris is going to miss some time, it might be McKitty in that role and not Davidson, but Davidson sure turned some heads throughout training camp and the preseason with his receiving ability. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I was excited to see if Joe Andrews could do it again, repeat that success from the Steelers game. I thought he had a nice game. He made some nice plays, got mixed up on the touchdown pass for the walk-in on the first touchdown. Him and Deion Jones blown coverage, but I believe that was going to be Joe Andreessen's spot there in the middle of the field. But he continued to show the ability to shed blocks, make tackles. He just got a great feel for the game, and he's been fun to watch. And I was really trying to key in on those edge rushers because it appears that the Bills will likely keep 5 defensive ends, and it's likely going to have to be Javon Solomon or Kingsley Jonathan. And I didn't think either of those guys necessarily played a great game, but I thought Kingsley Jonathan was able to create a little bit more pressure up front on that Bills defensive front.
Let me ask you this, and this will give you an idea. You'll understand where I'm coming from. Now, if, say, for instance, Cedric Van Pran Granger is a backup, what would happen and what kind of consideration would you, at this point, if one of the guards gets hurt, does Van Pran Granger have the ability to go in at guard and leave McGovern at center, or do you have to change 2 positions then, put McGovern back out at guard and Van Pran goes to center? Then you change 2 players instead. You know what I'm saying? That's really the question, right, for Van Pran Granger. Is he good enough to spell somebody at guard rather than have to go in at center? Yeah,
because ideally you're not moving 2 people. You want, if something were to happen to McGovern at center or Edwards at guard, you'd hate to move 2 guys. So whoever's going to be that primary backup, I believe on game days it'll be Alec Anderson, at least for the start of the season, where he would be a plug-and-play guy at any of the 3 interior spots. So you wouldn't be jumbling the lineup too much. But as the season goes on, hopefully the Bills' offensive line can stay healthy like they did last year. But if they're not able to, that's going to be something we're going to have to analyze. Can Van Pran Granger, can he play guard so we don't have to mix it up too much if just one guy goes down?
Let's talk about the quarterback situation because, again, it's another position that's a little compromised by injury. Left knee injury for Mitchell Trubisky, suffered in the Pittsburgh game, was not even capable of suiting up for this one, which prompted the signing of Anthony Brown this past week. He has since been released. Ben DiNucci, however, in his second appearance, goes 11 of 15 passing, 76 yards, just barely missed 1 touchdown pass, had another in the game, finishes with a 106.5 passer rating. My question to you, Eric, if Mitchell Trubisky is not ready to suit up for week 1 because of this knee injury, has Ben DiNucci done enough to be on this roster at least for week 1 as the backup quarterback for the Bills?
I would say not likely, and we'll see how it all shakes out with roster cuts downs coming, and if a guy like a Kyle Allen or Case Keenum or someone else becomes available, and the Bills decide to go that route. It was a tough situation that Ben DiNucci got put in. Playing golf on a Sunday and then starts against the Steelers or plays against the Steelers that following week, and Trubisky gets hurt and he goes in at the end of the first half, and so. I would say not likely, but this is a guy that did show progress from the first action he got in the preseason to the second, getting more and more comfortable in Joe Brady's offense. But if someone's coming in, pick him up this week, it might be tough to get a quarterback ready for week 1 to be the primary backup, where you might say, hey, this guy's at least been in the system for 2.5 weeks. And, if it's a week or two before we can get Trubisky back, this guy's going to be our guy. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I'm leaning against it, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did, just especially based upon the progression from the Steelers game to the Panthers game.
So as we wind up, get ready for week 1, we've got, you look ahead to the Arizona Cardinals. They just played yesterday against Denver. Impossible to say where their roster is at either, because they're in the same limbo spot that the Bills are. But starting out 1 o'clock, what are your thoughts on where? Because we've had some callers already today. The Bills' offense looks bad. Give us, and I obviously I'm not buying into that, but give us your assessment of where this team's going to be week 1.
Yeah, I think they're going to be ready to roll. You get Arizona coming across the country for a 1 o'clock game. You always, we would talk in those situations where we want to jump on them early, see if we can get them out of the game quickly, just based upon that's a tough adjustment for them. It's going to feel like 10 a.m. to them when the kickoff it goes live. But, that's when you look at the schedule and the difficulty that the Bills have, especially early on in the season, that Arizona game at home, week 1, essentially is a must win. I expect this team to come out ready to roll. And, when I understand people are judging the preseason and saying the offense didn't score a touchdown until that third preseason game and this and that, but I don't have a lot of concerns for this Bills offense. I think they'll come out strong. The question marks come on the defensive side of the ball for me, and, how consistent they can be at that safety spot. And then what type of progression are we going to see at that will linebacker spot filling in for Matt Milano? Is Dorian Williams going to be a liability in coverage, or are we going to see that year 1 to year 2 progression? And I hate to compare him because of the season Bernard had last year, but we saw that huge jump year 1 to year 2 with Bernard. Can we see something similar from Dorian Williams this year? And if those two things, if we can get consistent play from the safety position and then consistent play at that will linebacker spot, this Bills defense will be good again.
And those two tie together with some sub-package possibilities for this team too, Eric, because you say, okay, if the coaching staff makes the determination that maybe they want to go back to that dime package that they had last year after they lost Milano and wanted to put a third safety on the field to be better in coverage, I don't know that you can go to that right now because of all the injuries you've had at safety. So it's going to really be interesting to see what the coaching staff ultimately decides. You leave Dorian on the field and make him a 3-down linebacker because you don't have the answers at safety yet because of injury, or do you roll the dice and try that in week 1 against the Cardinals in obvious passing situations? I'm really fascinated to see how that unfolds.
I am too, and I think we will see that dime package. You had it in last year. Guys are comfortable. They understand more of the philosophy with that dime package, just having been in last year. You can show a guy like Cole Bishop, you can show him actual footage of the Bills running those packages last year and say, hey, this is going to be your role, whether that's in the box like Jordan Poyer was last year, or if he's going to be an off-ball safety on the back end. But I think they're going to have to. And, I think that creativity that they utilized last year was able to help stabilize that defense when Milano did get hurt. And I anticipate seeing it week 1 this year.
And then finally, we had, not to finish on a somber note here, but I know you and I were texting about this, but the untimely passing of Joe D'Alessandris, who was battling an acute illness in the hospital. Ravens offensive line coach, but he spent 4 seasons with you here, Eric, when you were playing under Chan Gailey. Just any thoughts you can share just about the person that Coach D'Alessandris was, knowing you worked with him on a daily basis for 4 seasons.
Yeah, it's been neat to see him honored the way he has. And, Joe D is a guy that meant a lot to me. He meant a lot to my career. He helped me develop as a young man. He poured into me constantly, a guy that I stayed in close contact with. Even as my career ended, he would always be calling to check on me and ask for pictures of the family and shoot me pictures of his kids and grandkids, and just a truly special person. And I'm going to miss him greatly. And I owe a lot of the success that I had on the field throughout my career to Joe. He came in my second year in the league under Chan, and it really helped develop me as a player. I transitioned back to the center position under his leadership that second season, and I learned a lot from him. And we had a bunch of laughs together. We fought at times. We laughed together. We cried together. But one heck of a ball coach. And it's always sad that all this great stuff is said about him. I almost wish he was. I know he can hear it. I know he's looking down on us, but I wish we would have honored him like this when he was still here, because he's just a truly special person.
Thank you, Eric.
Well said, Eric. Thanks for the time. We will catch up with you in short order. Enjoy the week of no football, because the regular season will be on us before we know it.
Yep, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.